Let's go ahead and get started. Good evening. I thought we could just go ahead and then you guys could at your leisure watch this video and get this information, which I think is really valuable information that we're going to be talking about. This is me, Sally, in that my experience working with students with autism and students in general is a lot of things that probably when you're learning criterion for autism or other things, they might not consider. I don't think there's any objectives in the MTTC about that you need to like your students. But I think we want to talk about this. Then I want to talk about the recent behavioral observations I did on this young lady who's transitioning to high school. And she didn't have autism. She had all sorts of things going on. And I don't think any of them was autism though. Then we're going to talk about, because we're talking about positive behavioral supports and the use of visuals in working with behavioral issues. We'll talk about behaviorist communication, and any of you that have had me before know that I eat, sleep, and drink behaviorist communication. And then we'll go through some visual supports examples that are dealing directly with behavior. And so as I follow my agenda, right? So I'm kind of spectrum-y in that I make an agenda and then I follow it. I guess I want to know, do you like your students? In that my semesters is made or not made by relationships with students. This summer's great. You guys are wanting to learn, and I can't tell you how much I enjoy you guys. And undergrads, this last year and a half, probably since COVID, that's been really difficult because these are students who maybe they were learning remotely at the end of high school, and just think of all the social skills and things like that you develop at that time. And then they came to college and were in remote. So I had them in class, and I'd put them in groups, and nobody knew how to talk to one another, and they'd all end up working individually. So I'd put them in groups and give them a project, and then maybe run down the hall to get a pop and then come back in, and everybody was like working by themselves, and I'd have to yell at them. So it's different. So any of you guys that are teaching in high schools, I'm sure you've seen that as well. And probably all kids in general. But here's what I know, and then I was finding research about this, is that when teachers make an intentional effort to get to know each of their students, as you guys do as best you can, because I know your caseloads are big and things like that. But when you make an effort and you get to know them, it really makes them feel like that they belong in the school, and that there's a connection to the school. And that goes double for parents. That there's nothing more that parents want than for their kid to feel connected, and for them to have their kid connected to different sorts of activities. And I'm going to talk about that with this person that I did the observation on, and the kinds of visuals that she needed. When you help people get connected, this builds a positive teacher-student relationship and increased engagement and yada yada. It's all good, because when you make the effort for your students to feel included, involved, this has nothing to do with level, right? This has nothing to do with if they're verbal or not. Is that, can you make somebody feel welcome? It really has great results. When people feel relaxed, like if you have students that tell you, fine, ask them. But I think more than not, a lot of you guys have students that are nonverbal, or they're very small. And then we work with those people that know them best, which is their family. So does it matter whether you like your students or not? I mean, you guys can answer that. I say yes. I was in a place last week where I think that people a lot of times have the idea that being professional with your students is not engaging with them. And I'm sure that many of you, either through student teaching or before, would kind of get the idea that you need to kind of hold back on things. And so even if you did like a student, it's probably best not to show that. And I'm saying don't do that, because when we're working with people that are confused by facial expressions, they're confused by what words mean, I think that you need to make every effort to display interest in your students, so that then they can begin to feel engaged and connected, because they know if you like them or not. The students know. So if you're very professional and don't give emotion, they're not gonna know one way or the other. One of my highest compliments I ever got was because I taught high school emotional disturbance, ED, LD, BD, emotional disturbance, learning disabilities, behavior disorders. And they were all high school age. And one of the things, there was a student that I didn't really like him. I'm not saying you have to like everybody, but the students can't know that you don't like them, right? And so this one student, I overheard him out in the hallway. And he said, he was talking about how, oh yeah, Mrs. Burton, she loves me. I can't do anything wrong. And he was bragging about that to people. And I thought, wow, I was amazed that he thought that, but I was proud that he did think that, because when students know if you don't like them, that changes everything, doesn't it? I mean, I think the level of interest, engagement, ability to not be hostile and nasty, those things kind of change. And sometimes it's easy to like them, and sometimes you need to get to know them. So I'm going to talk about some of the ways that you want to get to know people, because you're going to start off the school year with people, and you're going to have some students you've had from the year before. But when you're in any kind of doubt, always ask parents for the vision that they have for their child. Before I did my observation last week, that's what I did with this mom who I really did not know her very well. And I just said, she said, her daughter is hitting people a lot and they're wanting to make a more restrictive placement. And she just knew that her daughter was miserable there. So I didn't know her daughter, hadn't met her, but one thing I said is, well, tell me, this was the first question I always ask parents, is like, tell me what your vision is for your child. And this is her vision. So it gave me an idea about, when I was observing her in school, what I was seeing, and did it fit with the vision that the parents had. And some of it did, but a lot of it didn't either. And they these parents wanted their daughter to develop some self-advocacy skills. And so self-advocacy skills and being assertive, I think that all of you are probably assertive, and you probably want your children to be assertive, right? It was interesting. I had my son was around last night, and he's got a 10-year-old daughter, and he was saying that the teacher said that she was argumentative. And he's coached in college. He coaches college football. He's just, been around lots of different terrible things that have happened to people, as anybody does in college football. And so he was kind of pleased, and his wife was like, wanted Kinley to, just be real sweet and get along. And he's like, yeah, you know what? There are too many girls that do that end up, bad things happen to them. So I think that we want people to be assertive enough. And so sometimes using visuals, teaching students ways to let people know when there's a boundary, like on touching, because sometimes, I know you've seen it, parapros and even like in Special Olympics, they have the huggers. Well, I mean, think about that. Do you want anybody to be able to hug anybody? I certainly don't allow anybody to hug me, I love people. I love to hug, but if there's somebody that I'm kind of creeped out about or I don't know, I don't want them to do that. So I want you to think about that self-advocacy piece. And it doesn't mean they know the laws and can go to their IEP necessarily, but it does mean that if people are around them or people are doing things around them that upset them, that can be honored by teaching them boundaries. One of the ways I've taught students boundaries when they don't want people very near them. Sometimes for sensory reasons they don't, because that keeps people safe. But there's a lot of times in special ed where, especially I got to say it with behavioral approaches, where they want compliance. And compliance, I don't necessarily think is a good thing to have. Is first like using a visual of like a handout. So I'll put my hand up like that. So it's like you want them to learn that if somebody's getting up too close to them, that they can use that, or they can use a card, which says kind of like, back off. But then also then this parent wanted their children, their daughter to be exposed to, and not necessarily, be top of the class in some of these things, because some of them were very difficult. She was in this Japanese Asian American appreciation gen ed activity that she didn't have any idea what was going on, but you know what, she loved it, and it was I think it was still a very positive experience. So, and here's what I know, and that's what I know: school isn't going to succeed, and life isn't really successful. And you guys know, in your jobs, you stay in jobs where you enjoy the people that you're around and you have fun with them. And, you enjoyed college, perhaps. My sons all really enjoyed college, and I personally enjoyed college a lot too, because it was fun. So we know that having fun in school is important, and having fun plays a big part in a student wanting to come to school. And so and this was something I had the parents list all the different things that their daughter loved. And she loves, performances of all kinds. And I know this first bullet right there impacts scheduling, doesn't it? Because maybe she could be in an orchestra class, or she could be in a band class, or in a chorale class. And you know how sometimes in high school, some of those things get very la-di-da-di, because it's people that are auditioning for, college music scholarships and things. But she would want to be in there, not to do that, but because she enjoyed the music. So this was something I brought up and with the team, and they were like, oh, I didn't even think about that, because otherwise they were, thinking, well, she can't read music, she can't read notes, so she couldn't be in music class. Okay, she enjoys swimming and roller coasters, and the family does a lot. They go to Cedar Point lots, they travel. I think they've been to Europe and things like that. She likes routine with occasional changes, but she needs to know. So in that needing to know now and next, which hopefully you guys are really kind of getting a feel for, that she must know kind of what's going on. And I have some specific examples of ways that this was not honored. And these are all the places that she traveled. And knowing that somebody likes travel and has been a lot of different places can change up how people work with her. And then how we can, if we can help her, we can kind of not coerce her, but kind of cajole her into doing different sorts of things. She isn't that rigid or that stubborn, in that, you have to have some controls on things, because otherwise she'd just be on her iPad looking at YouTube all the time. I've been on TikTok a lot lately because of Vanderpump's rules. So I could identify with that. And she went to camp, and she loves social opportunities. So luckily, the high school where she's going to be going has a links program. And so there'll be opportunity for her to participate with typical kids and things like that. Okay. So when I got into the school, and I'm supposed to start it at 9:30, and I got in there at like 9:20 or something like that. And then at 9:30 was straight escorted into the classroom, where the student was walked right up to me because I had a visitor's lanyard on, and she came up to me and she held my lanyard and put hers next to it. And this girl is not very verbal, but you could tell that she was matching and liked, I had a visitor's thing, and it was kind of like her student tag. But anyway, so I was just sitting in kind of where they were. And the teacher was talking about the things upcoming. And so then the parapro was working with her. And the girl kept saying she was scared. She was scared. She was scared of the party. And because everybody was all excited about this 8th grade party. And so she said, well, why would you be scared of a pizza party? And then it was dropped. And then she said party, 8th grade party or something. And then people said, quiet, we're not talking about that now. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's such an because she didn't know what a party was. I mean, maybe she'd been to parties in her house, but an 8th grade party might be very different. And so I'm thinking, why couldn't they stop right then? And I was able to talk with the teacher and kind of mention this to her, like, maybe, do you have any social stories? Do you know about social stories? Is there anything you can do to kind of get her ready for an 8th grade party? Make a picture book or something, or, have some people that have been to a party task those things out, like in a task list. So there were lots of visual opportunities and none were taken. The classroom was entirely auditory or verbal. And then, there were no matching activities because I'd said, oh gosh, she loves to match. She matched my, my name tag. And there were some puzzles and different other kinds of things she was doing. And I said, well, she's really good at matching. So, is there some way we could, set up kind of a model of something and then have her match it? And they were like, that's not how you do it. And so, all right, fine. She loves fun. And she was talking like very silly. And so then when they were getting her to her seat, she kept saying, what if chairs talked? What if chairs talk? Chairs talking, chairs talking. And she was kind of saying it over and over again. And then they just kept telling her she needed to sit down and it was inappropriate. And it's like she went from like trying to, and I think I identified with her because think of all the times when you like try to start a conversation with somebody and you're trying to be kind of fun and then not appropriate now. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're missing the opportunity, So when I was talking earlier about, you don't necessarily have to like every student, but you need to act like you like them. And the impression I was getting was that they didn't. And I may not be accurate at all, but that's kind of what I observed. So, and so on this chair thing, I was like, with chairs talking. And then of course I'm always like an instigator because then I was like sitting in the back and she was kind of meandering around. So I kind of got behind the chair and I said the girl's name and I said, come sit on me. And so she started laughing and came right over to the chair, so it's like, take what people give you. If they make a joke and are laughing about something, and for instance, my brother would say mobile oil. And if you could then use mobile oil in some reason to get him, to the next activity or whatever, you do it and it would work. But I didn't understand why you just can't have fun with people, right? And it wasn't going to take time. It was certainly not going to take any money or anything like that. But having fun is a positive instructional approach to incorporate student interests into directions for the students. And I saw her with another parapro later on in the day who was fabulous at that. And the difference that it made was night and day. So it's like, if you're having behavioral issues with a student, like look around and see how is it that people are treating them. And so then on in this observation, they did a smart board activity that went like way long. And the students were all starting a intensive resource room. And they were doing a number match game, which you would have thought she'd like, and she would have liked it once or twice. But then, they went on and on. And she wasn't interested. When they would call her name, she would, and this was after 2 or 3 times, she would get up and walk backwards instead of walking forward up towards the smart board. And then everybody would freak out, and they would go, oh, watch out, you know, turn around, walk correctly. What's wrong with you? Why don't you walk correctly? Well, I think she was trying to have fun. All right. And it was just clear as a bell to me, like, you know, this is really stupid. So it doesn't really matter if I walk backwards up to the front. And it was kind of fun to see that. It's like, but I mean, it was fun, but it was like, why are people not getting that? It's interesting the difference one person can make, because then a substitute parapro, or I don't even know what she was, substitute teacher or something, came into the room a little bit later, and she was fabulous. She was fabulous and she was enthusiastic, and she was, you know, getting students to kind of do things, and was reinforcing them and go, oh, good job. And just her tone of voice, all those different sorts of things really mattered. So your classroom management and your ability to have instructional control, which when you're a teacher, you have to have control of things, right? But that does not mean you have to act like you've got to stick up your, you know what, right? And I think that sometimes people have always thought being professional was like that. And how much better everybody was when this one person came in and took over, and it was very fun. And then she went to this gen ed setting, and the parapro was, again, fabulous in keeping her engaged and things like that. So you've always got to know what the person's needs are. So both from her parents and from what I observed, she needed visual supports. Oh my gosh. So originally it was that she was like hitting people all the time. So then that's what the school's focus was, is that she has to stop hitting. So they were collecting data on the hitting, but they weren't looking why. And that's the difference. One of the things is that, you know, even in a pretty good schedule, students really need to know what the expectations are. You know, she needs proactive visual supports, you know, all kinds of visual supports. And when I had a later on meeting with her next year's teacher and her parents and the special ed director, we were coming up with like a million ways and things to get started on this summer, because, you know, she'll be coming into the high school for next year. And she also wanted to know, and I observed this, like she always wanted to know, like was looking around, like what parapro would she be working with? And it made her real nervous that she didn't have any idea. And then sometimes, as it is, that there were substitutes in there. So this, if you looked at the suggested visual, this is what I said we need to do for next year, is that she needed to have like a chart with a picture of the staff, and maybe you'd even have a fourth one in the front, and, you know, to the right, that had her picture. But then who's going to be working with her? What is the location? Where are they going to go? They're going to go to room 102. What is the activity? And if you have students that need the precise times, then you put it that way. And we were all kind of agreeing she was probably going to do better in high school than middle school, because in high school, you know how that bell rings at, you know, 9:02 to 9:53 and all that kind of stuff. So there isn't any, when people are done, the bell's going to ring regardless. So doing a chart so that she could have that on her, she could have that in a notebook and a planner, something that she could have access to all the time. Thing is, when you provide visual supports for people, you don't just have them in one place. They need to be portable. So you might have a chart in the classroom, right? You might have something on the person's desk. The person might have something in their Trapper Keeper, which I'm interested to see that Trapper Keepers are now kind of coming back, and there were people with Trapper Keepers in the school. And then at home, there should be like a family calendar that maybe, you know, kind of mimics some of this stuff, only with the family sorts of activities. And then I had everybody I was working with this young lady didn't know about social stories. They didn't know about power cards. So I shared with them the PowerPoints that we learned from, and they were so excited about that because they had never heard about them, and they were going to, begin using them as I recommended. And social stories, and then comic strip conversations. This is just kind of a different little form of a social story, this comic strip one. So anyway, those were just some of the suggested visuals. Always just to kind of remember, as we're talking about behavior is telling us something. Our job is to see the behavior as information, not aggravation. And again, remember that, you guys, behavior is not anything bad. Behavior is whatever the person is doing. Behavior is communication, and that's the definition of it. And it's just like if somebody doesn't share with you, doesn't communicate in a traditional manner, instead sometimes then they might communicate through actions. We all do this, right? We get up, we leave, we kick something, we knock something on the floor when we're angry. These are the sorts of things that might happen. We have to look at when students are engaging in something and they're talking back, or they're talking out, or they're out of their seat, whatever the issue is. Those are, of course, the things that you can do power cards, but first you need to identify the behavior, and that's really important. And so, as I was saying at the beginning, don't use terms like hygiene. Instead, use terms that are specific to whatever that kid needs to be doing, because that's nothing but instructional to the kid. So what happens when students can't communicate what they need? Well, that's when we have behavioral issues, right? Running away and taking people's things, and scratching, and all the different, and hitting parapros, and slapping people, and running away. Or don't forget the happy stuff too, that somebody might smile, or they might come up to somebody to communicate what they're thinking as well. So what do we do with problem behaviors? So when we see these problem behaviors, it's a way for us to learn about the person, just like one of those little memes I had there about it. It's an opportunity it's not an aggravation. They're not doing that to be mean or to drive you nuts. They're doing it because there's a reason. I list these because when I'm in special education classrooms, or it's a special education student and they're in the general ed classroom, but they don't have any idea what's going on. They don't have visual supports. Lots of times, then these are the things that I see, that there's a lack of choice, control. They don't have any control over any other opportunities, boredom, frustration with boredom, that overall they don't have any fun. And that's you have to want to get up and go to school. Anytime when there are transportation issues, when people won't get on the bus or they won't get off the bus, different things like that may indicate their quality of life either at home or at school, right? So we've got to think about that. You have control as a teacher to make sure that there's one or two things in that student schedule that is something that they would enjoy, because schedules should have things people want to do and things people need to do. A schedule should not just be class activities. It should not be that. I mean, you can have a task list with that, but when we're talking about like a schedule, it should include all kinds of things that the person likes to do as well. And also, we need to remember to not have behavioral strategies that don't respect people's individual preferences, or if they have sensory processing problems. Remember, special ed has been around a long time. And I graduated from college when the federal law passed mandating special education. So this has been around like for a long time, and there've been a lot of terms that can maybe get old special ed teachers like me laughing, and it's the things that sometimes I still hear, where we say like good hands down behavior, and just because it's like it's kind of insulting, and just it's like, instead, why don't we just say hands at your side or something, as opposed to good hands down behavior. This next section is going to include a wide variety of visual supports that I found on, and I've got the link for it on the resource page, one of the last slides from the Indiana Resource Center for Autism is excellent. It's got all kinds of different things, but these are some of the visual supports that that you can utilize for different kinds of things. And just remember, with behavior, there's always a reason for something. And it's never a bad thing to just kind of guess, walking out of the room, biting self. It could be, what does it mean? Okay. What does it mean? It generally means they don't have a good idea of what the expectations are and where they are and what's next. And again, visual supports, critical for that. And anytime a student engages in naughty, we'll just call it naughty behavior, we call it non-compliant, although I always hate that, because lots of times when people say kids are non-compliant, the kid has no idea what to do, right? And here's what I believe, you guys, and it is that students will generally 97, 98% of the time do their very, very best to follow the directions, right? They're going to try to follow the directions, but if they don't know the directions or they do not understand the directions, then they're probably not going to do them. And then that looks like a behavior problem. We tell everybody to line up and that student puts his head down. That looks like non-compliance. If we tell people it's time to come inside from recess, oh my, we've got nice weather, so I'm sure that you're dealing with this, and then ends up that people have to chase the person around, and then of course they go the furthest the furthest part of the playground field, and you're chasing them all and trying to get them in. Okay, maybe they don't know what the process is to stop what they're doing, and maybe they have no idea how to get in the building. And this is not a lie. You know what I did once in a place where I was helping out? It was a situation where it was the principal, it was everybody that would chase this kid and try to get him in from recess or lunchtime or whatever the break in the day was. And I found some road cones, that because there was construction going on, and I went and got, I think I got permission, I might not have, and got like about 10 of them and got the student, like, so that they could see that this is how you get in the building, that, because in all the construction now, don't you have to very carefully follow like what the signs are saying and where the exits are and all those sorts of things. So it's like I did that, and the student could look at those cones and get in the building. When we're talking about visuals, we're not just talking about cards and pictures and things like that. Remember, we're talking about objects. We're talking about a person wearing a red coat. Just think about like the lunch ladies or the playground duties. They usually, in schools where I've been, they're wearing like an orange kind of jacket. At least they have been in the ones I've been in. So, I mean, that's kind of a visual, right? So then you can get a picture of that and teach the kid, this is what you look for. So then that visual is that the playground duty and their identifiable jacket. Temple Grandin has this thing where she always wants teachers to have on like special colored shirts and things like that. Well, I don't even think that's realistic, but this is one thing I learned in my student teaching. And this was like in 4th grade, but I feel like I've used it in lots of different places and it's helped. And that is because it's confusing for students to know who's important and who they should pay attention to. So Miss Carla Hosel, my 4th grade teacher a trillion years ago, who was phenomenal, would say that only the person standing was the person in charge. So when, I would always be like seated, and when she was the teacher, and when I was the teacher as a student teacher taking over, then she would be seated. So the students knew very clearly whoever was standing up What's the person they need to pay attention to? Let's not make light of that with autism, because students, they don't know where to look, right? Because they've started since they were babies. They were not looking in the appropriate place. They were not looking at their mothers. They were not looking at other people. We all know that eye gaze is an issue in autism. So we need to make things very, very, very clear for them. So let's get into some of this stuff. Because remember, auditory processing, weakest link, and maybe visuals are the answer. And so this is the 5-point scale. This is one for anxiety, and it's just very simple. And if these kinds of icons would work, what you have to do if you're using the 5-point scale, and hopefully a lot of you have used them, it's better to get more specific, but you got to define, okay, one is, what does that person look like? We've made 5-point scales where we had like video of what the student looked like, so that you could click on the video and the kid was, working nicely and that kind of stuff, or displaying other kinds of, smiling or laughing or something. So it's best to have real life pictures of what does that student look like when they're happy? What does the student look like when they're annoyed? And then adding in maybe some descriptors that maybe somebody is starting to rock, or they're, making a fist or something like that. When they're frustrated, what do they look like? And again, I would say, well, think of it like video modeling, and maybe it doesn't need to be the kid. Maybe it could be somebody that the kid would look at and get them to act out. Get your own children to act out. Everybody always uses their own kids for these kinds of things too. And then 4 and then 5. But you have to teach people, because they don't recognize, they have no, the term self-regulation. They have no idea. They have no idea when it is. They can, when we talk about kids going 0 to 60, they don't know. They don't understand how it is they're feeling. And then what are the variables that are going to take them up to a 5 really quickly. So this is something that you might do as a behavioral intervention when you're working with somebody. And this was another accepting no for an answer. So these are things that you could make into power cards, you could make into social stories. Look at the person. So accepting no for an answer, this would be the steps. If you were that kid who didn't do well with hearing no, look at the person and use their name. So we would teach the student to look at you and say your name, and then ask, is this a good time to make a request? If the answer is no, say okay, and then listen to the person's reasons. This may not work for a lot of kids, but these are all just ideas for you guys to kind of start with, and then you try it and you go, oh, this is stupid, this doesn't work, and then you make it better, because with all your experience, you absolutely can do that. And then asking somebody to play. At recess and in my class, there are lots of kids I can play with. When I want to play with someone, I need to do these things. First, I look at the person's face. Next, I say their name to get their attention. And then I wait until that person looks back at me. And then I would have followed up with that and then say, will you play with me? Because I've done way too much of this kind of stuff with college students. And especially when they're trying to ask a girl to go to coffee with them or something. And if I would, for the last time I did that with somebody, they would have then not moved. They would have waited till the person looked back at them, and then they wouldn't have said anything. So we took a student to the brothers on campus, have a barber shop that they put on, I think like once every 2 weeks. So anybody can go and get their hair cut. They don't have to pay and things like that. It's sponsored by this organization on campus. And so one of our students, K1, I said, well, let's go there. And so I had somebody take him to the barbershop, activity, whatever you want to call it. And the guy that took him said, okay, K1, that's where you get in line. And when they call your name, then they'll do your hair. So he went up and signed his name in, but then he just didn't know that then when they called your name, that then you would go and then you would, and so it was the end. and nobody did his hair, and you left. And then somebody said, did you get your hair cut at the barbershop? And he said, no, they didn't ever come up to me. So it's like, don't ever take for granted this kind of completing the thing. So see, it's like, these are examples, but obviously not perfect. Here's a bus reminder. This is a list of school bus reminders. And I know that we have many, many students that, and I don't know if any of you have students that have special bus aids because they have significant behavioral challenges, but these are reminders: talking quietly, sitting in the seat belt on, hands to self. Then, I would have added a couple more steps in there, because think about packing. And I know one of you guys had this idea too, getting like the backpack ready so that they had listening devices in there and things like that. So it's kind of a little format for you guys to learn from. This is calming. Oh my gosh, look at that. I tried to fit all this in one page. Okay, this is the first example of a calming. And then the activity, having a timer and things like that, and a chalkboard, I think is one of the things that they said you needed to have, and a comfortable place to sit. So you're going to take 10 slow, deep breaths. You're going to get paper and colored pencils from the shelf. We're going to write and draw. We're going to read or listen. So it gives choices about what a person can do for when they're in school. And I can see that I would really want to make this more specific. But again, it's a good start. And this is calming too. So this is a kind of a different format, more specific. Quietly go to the calming area. So when you guys are doing your task list for part of your final project, this maybe kind of gives you some ideas too, how you want to do that. Quietly go to the calming area and set the timer. Sit down on the carpet square. I would have had this as a separate step. I would have had it as two, really, because it's different than the timer. And behaviorally, I like to take on one behavior at a time, and the behavior of setting the timer would be the first one. Second one would be sitting on the carpet square, and then counting to 10, then taking 10 deep breaths, and then writing or drawing. That's kind of vague. And so if maybe you'd want to have a specific topic that you would work with the student to do. With college students, with autism, the most difficult thing to do is just like the autism definition says in the Michigan Department of Ed, initiating. So starting an activity is difficult. Maintaining and continuing the activity is difficult. Ending the activity is difficult, because otherwise they don't know. Passage of time is difficult. They don't understand it, which is why you can't use words like later. You need to be specific with a timer. You know what, with the girl that we were observing, people kept saying that to her. She'd say, what's next, or something, or when's Mr. B coming, or something. And they would say, in a few minutes, and she would getting frustrated. So I think about this with your students, and people don't think about this, but you guys you're smarter, right? So you're going to say 2 minutes, and then you have a timer. And this timer, we agreed, would not work with this particular student because she likes to look at the seconds. So some kids would want to look at the seconds. And so this kind of timer, a time timer, would be fine. And I know a lot of you guys have them. They're on smart boards and computers and all kinds of different things. But this is a series of things that would be, you would progress through. This is a good one. This gave me lots of really good ideas. So this is a social narrative. Social narrative means social story that they're using, and they may not meet the criteria of everything that they have, but again, an idea. My mom lives in one house. Sometimes I live with her. My dad lives in another house. Sometimes I live with him. There are times I will miss my mom. There are times I will miss my dad. Sometimes I will be sad or mad. It's okay to be sad or mad. So they do kind of hit most of the criteria. I will be happy again soon. I don't know about that. Now I have 2 houses. I can have fun at both houses. And I'm sure many of you deal with the switch with students either in the middle of the week, or Monday they come in, dragging with, haven't had a bath all weekend and all that kind of stuff. And it just like, you can't control what goes on in various households, right, as a teacher, but providing some examples of schedules is something that parents would really appreciate. And I've been an expert witness in court different times, and some of the times my tasks have been to, in both homes, come up with schedules that would work, and so that the student has visuals so that they would know when they're at mom's house, when they're in dad's house. That's horrible for every kid, right? But I think about if you have autism. So you could take this and like run with it and do a million different kinds of visuals, power cards and social stories and things like that. So, and then all of us have had students that point out anybody different, right? And so this is when, and everyone is different. Social narrative, again, social story. And I would do this I'd have like one page at a time. I would have it like a book. So like when you guys do your social story, some of it, they're going to look every which way. And I would say, I would make like a little, almost like a PowerPoint, make it into like a book, run it off in slides and then attach it like a book, and then have each one of these things broken down on a page with real life pictures. And again, remember the whole thing on pictures, you use what works. But if you're not getting where you want to go with students understanding, so if nobody's following directions, then think about getting real kinds of pictures. This is what students with autism need. Okay, they need to know what the activity is going to be, where it's going to be, and how long it's going to last. They want to know that. And this, I have found this is true from tiny kids to college students. My own brother, when he was alive, and he would be at my house like most Sunday nights, I would go pick him up and he'd have dinner with us. And the time marker for when we were done and he was going to get in the car and I was going to drive him back to his apartment was 8 o'clock. And we would watch 60 Minutes, and the minute 60 Minutes was over, then he would go get his coat on. Okay, so it's like you can have those kinds of routines that are honored. Why we use visuals, and like, it's like he didn't need that for us, right? But he needed visuals for every other place so that people would have an understanding of how to work with him. So think about this with students, that you have to consider is this: do not assume, and that's where that, we toss that silly high functioning thing out, right? Students can have skills and they can be great, and that's wonderful, but sometimes it's autism. These are the resources I wanted you guys to look at, and this comes from this Indiana Resource Center. The visuals in autism, of everything I just went through, kind of came from there. Here are something, oh my gosh, don't forget about color. Don't forget about sticky notes. I use sticky notes, and I have different colors. And when I'm with our college students, have mentors that attend class with them, and kind of like links students, only they're paid, and most of them are graduate students. If they need to communicate with a student, depending on the type of classroom it is, sometimes it's it's the best way to communicate with them is to text them. But sometimes the best way is to take a sticky note and write down whatever the message is. Usually it's like a reminder, because we had a student that would be staring at this girl that he liked, and he was like staring at her like a creep for way too long. And so it would be a note to please look down, stop staring at the person. So sticky notes are great as a teacher, as a consultant. I've used sticky notes, And I've written notes to students that, because we never want to embarrass anybody, right? We never want to embarrass people. And so what if you have somebody that they're digging on up their butt, or their, booger situation is just getting out of hand and everybody's getting grossed out. Well, as opposed to sitting and letting them gross everybody out, that's your job. You need to figure out how to stop that without embarrassing them. So what I have done is, on a sticky note, as I'm going around the classroom, I write down on one and I put it on the kid's desk, get a Kleenex immediately, or get a Kleenex now, or something like that. I've done this too. I've said, meet me in the hallway, because we don't want to. You've seen the behavioral issues that happen with trying to get a kid out of the classroom by screaming at him and saying, you need to leave now. You need to leave. Come on. You need to come out in the hallway now. We all know what that can turn into. And you want to avoid that. All of the visual supports you can use can avoid things. Now, I got some duct tape on here. Oh my gosh, I've created magic with duct tape. And I, check with your janitor, but usually it's been fine every place. If they don't know what it is, it's able, you're able to pull it up, and it doesn't ruin anything. But anyway, what I have used duct tape for is, we had a student who would come into the classroom and people would have to be physically guiding him. And he was a high school student, and he was like very large. He was like 6'5" or something like that. And it would turn into this giant, restraint sort of situation. So people would walk in, hold on to him to try to guide him to his desk. And it was like, that was just the worst. And so what I did was find out his favorite color when he came in the room. And he didn't do verbal cues very well. So I had yellow, which was his favorite color, kind of at where he was, like up at 6'5", right? And then it went down the wall, and then it was just like a guide. Then it was like on the floor, and it was follow the yellow, and then it stopped at where he hung his coat up. And then it stopped at, this was a post-high classroom, and it would stop at where they would put their lunches. You had like a refrigerator situation. And then he would continue on, and then, go to his desk, right? And it was like, it stopped that problem of him just getting out. Because remember, the passage of time and the environment, those things are all wacky to many, many individuals on the spectrum. And so if you can provide a guide for them to do it, as opposed to people nagging them, because we want people to be independent. So we want to figure out how is it we can do things. And then also what I've done in a classroom, I had duct tape around, like, this was a student who was like, it was always a giant mess. His books were everywhere. Kleenex was everywhere, paper was everywhere. It was like he was a big mess. So then they kind of ostracized him in the classroom, and they kind of pushed him towards the back of the room. And it was like, he needed boundaries, right? So what we did was, around his desk, we put, we gave him like that much room on each side of his desk. And then as time went, we could kind of make it a little bit smaller. And then it was like, hey, nothing could be outside of these lines, outside of the duct tape. And it worked. And it worked. When you're thinking about visual supports, you use them wherever the person is. But you can use them in, I've used them in the hallways too. And think about, like, do you guys ever follow like at the airport? Do you ever follow? It's like some airports, our Detroit Metro doesn't, but Philadelphia Airport, you follow different colored lines to go to different baggage and different things like that. So I mean, it's not a crazy sort of thing, but these are the things that in gen ed you could use. You could use them like around desks. One thing, if you go to this website, this Indiana Resource Center, there's a thing on Teach, and it's teaching, educating autistic children I forget what the rest of the initials stand for, but that teaches a left to right approach and things. So there's many ways you would use visuals. And why do, going back to the beginning, we have to know what people like in order to figure out how are we going to get them to look at something. Well, they're going to look at it because they like the color. They're going to look at it because it's a topic that they're interested in, a character they're interested in, or something like that. So color, sticky notes, duct tape. And if you go to Myers, and I was just at Myers earlier, they've got like packs you can get of different, you know, I mean, there's different like cartoony kinds of things, and then there's just like plain colors and things like that. But I love using duct tape. So I'm gonna say good night to everybody. Okay, good night. Bye-bye now.